Hi, hello,
Hello.
hello.
Hey
How are
guys.
you? How are
I'm
you?
very good.
Yeah,
I'm very good. It's good to see you all in real time.
Yeah.
It's exciting, like a party. You're in a library, you're in a
Almost, yeah.
cave, and you're in an art gallery. I'm not sure where you
I am in the kitchen.
Okay. There you go.
I am outside. I am
Ah.
in the mountain because there is no Wi-Fi right here.
Oh wow. You had to
There-
climb a mountain to get a
yeah,
signal.
I am with
With the phone.
four
Yeah.
Well, you win the prize for effort. Definitely.
Yes, let's hope that everything all right.
Here's hoping. I mean,
Yeah.
it's already fun, so
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
people have
exactly.
to listen to it.
Yeah. So it's an honor to have you here. It's a big time for us.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm aware that some of the movies and things I've worked on, and especially Jordan's films, like go all over the world. I usually just stay in my little edit room, and it's all hype. It's all on the internet. I only hear
That's where
about
the
that.
magic happens.
Yeah, but so it's it's exciting and it's always a little surprising when you're like, oh wait, no, there's actual people are there watching it and liking it and responding to it, because I don't get to hear that all the time, so it's cool. Thank you for wanting to talk about it.
No, thank you to you. Yeah, really.
Thank you, really.
Yeah,
Our pleasure.
your work is amazing. It's really true what I say. It's Nope, amazing movie, really well edited, masterpiece of the genre, really.
Thank you. I'll take all the credit.
Yeah. Because here in Italy, I think is come out Nope a couple of weeks after the American release, because
Right.
it come out I think in mid-August. I don't know in America when come out.
It was the end of July, but I remember Jordan and Daniel and Kiki they went to Rome, I believe,
exactly.
and did it.
Yeah. And saw it on a big screen is amazing, really. Yeah.
Incredible. Really incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too shabby what Hoyte van Hoytema and Jordan can pull off with the camera.
Yeah, it's wide shot, amazing, really.
Yeah, it was. I don't get material. I mean, I love all the things I've worked on, but I don't get material that looks like that very often. I mean, nobody is shooting that way very much, so it's exciting stuff and crazy. I feel a lot of responsibility every frame that I get. I'm like, oh my God, all the work that went into this.
Yeah. So, shall we begin with the question?
Whatever you like, whatever you want to discuss.
Yeah. So, talking about Nope, I see. I think last week when I was not in the mountain with freezing at all of this, I wanted to ask you. Nope is difficult to set in a genre. Is not horror. Is not. There are a lot of it. There are comedy. There are western. I saw a little of. I saw even Spielberg. Everything I saw on it. Everything, and it's beautiful because of this. It's not okay. I see an horror. No, it's not like this. What do you think about this? The Mr. Peele don't never do an horror, a drama, a comedy. It's melting
okay,
pot.
well, you will have to tell me when to stop talking, because I could talk about this a lot. But I have one question. I have one question first, which is they didn't translate the title in Italy. It's just Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, Nope.
Nope.
Is there a word like Nope in Italian?
And
it's not quite no,
yeah,
but it's like no with a shrug.
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
it gets
So
lost.
you-
It got lost in translation, but yeah,
yeah.
but it
Yeah.
still works.
Yes. Well, you have better gestures.
Yeah,
so you can
exactly.
do it. You can just do it with the gestures.
We need a
well,
gesture translation for the movie.
yes, that would be amazing. A picture in picture. Just yeah, I mean, let's do it. We got there first. Well, I think that Get Out and Us. I didn't edit Get Out, but I watched it a lot, and I talked to Jordan a lot about it before and after. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think Get Out and Us are obviously like a little closer to certain specific horror traditions of the home invasion or the doppelganger, and then in Get Out, the kind of psychological thriller and body swapping kind of stuff. So he seems to be I don't know if he's going to keep going in this direction, but he's been seeming to go in the Jordan has sort of each time kind of been sort of summoning more resources, and also both in the filmmaking, but also in the research and the ideas when writing it. I guess I think about it sounds very pretentious, but I think about it a little bit like if you study music, especially in the age of like classical music, you know, specifically within the sort of 1800s, audiences for that were small, they were elite, but because there wasn't recorded music, but though they knew all the melodies of all the pieces, and all you had to do in writing a new piece is just hint at one of those other melodies, and people knew, they were familiar with it. And or I think Indian classical music works that way also, like people know these tunes, and often they're incorporating maybe folk melody in there that people have been singing for thousands of years. Sometimes it's a little note or two from a piece that came out just a few months ago, and you're kind of winking at the audience a little bit. So, and jazz does this too. In solos, they'll throw in a little happy birthday or something like that just for fun sometimes, or a pop music song. So I think Jordan works a little bit that way, where it feels maybe a little bit more like in the moment he kind of goes in that direction, knowing that the audience is familiar with it, because we live now in a time where, you know, people are hyper familiar with all of these variations on the themes of, like you said, cowboy. I mean, there's already been cowboys and aliens movies, so that's even part of it. So it's like you can't, if you, I think he gets very excited by sort of challenging the audience to see how, like, to come with him into the depths of culture like that. And he's not forcing it because his brain works that way, but I think he gets a little excitement when he's like, oh, let's see if this rings the same bell for other people that it does for me when I'm writing it. And then they'll add more in the production design. And then when we're editing, we'll do that a little bit with the music, and the composer will do it a little bit, and we'll do it, maybe we'll say, ooh, you know what we could do is maybe treat this scene with a little bit of a nod to the way this scene is edited, but it's usually unspoken. Usually, I think we're kind of saturated with the same influences, so it ends up just coming out. And then part of what's fun is after we've worked and worked and worked for a month or 2 months, and then we stop and we watch the whole movie, then we talk about it a lot. We go, oh, that's like that. And, you know, but we haven't talked about it really necessarily while we're doing it. Maybe a little when we need to. And certainly he is with the costume designer and the actors and everyone. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I as an editor don't have to necessarily worry about the box office. I can have an okay career even if I only worked on things that don't make very much money. It is good for me if they do make a lot of money, but it doesn't cancel me out. Whereas a director, a producer, they don't get the money again if they have a couple in a row or even one really bad miscalculation. So from my seat, I enjoy it being really sort of unclassifiable and blending everything. And I believe that the audience wants that too, or an audience wants that, but I don't have to worry about it too much if they don't. I try because I want the director to be happy. And if that's part of their goal, and Jordan is definitely interested in showing a lot of people, mostly because it's all about a big conversation for everyone to have. I'm sure he's happy about the success as well, but I think he really is interested in, being a part of the popular culture conversation. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. Completely.
Okay.
Yeah. Jordan.
What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's amazing because it's a real author, because you can do everything with this. We are not in focus only in a genre, in a certain type of film. You can do everything, and the creativity is at the top.
Yeah, and film and television is a modern medium, and modernism, and especially postmodernism, is all about that. It's all about, and people forget, now we think of Spielberg as this very clear thing.
Yeah.
But those first movies were, or you think of like late Hitchcock, where I think a lot of early Hitchcock fans hated later Hitchcock. This is what I gather, but because they felt kind of too simple or too manipulative, or just too much of a device for each film. Like, what, this one's just about birds? Like, what are you talking about? Or this one's just about the experience of vertigo. Like, come on. Or like, we're just gonna look out the back of a car. I mean, these things. But so at the time, I think it was like, well, what is this? What are you doing? And then 20 years later, it's a very defined thing when you look back at it. So I think Jordan is, working in that same mode.
Yeah. Never annoying.
Hopefully not. Some people want, or at least I never know what to make of. I mean, you've probably heard people too, or seen on the internet say like, nah, I like Get Out the most. And then, when Us came out, they're like, not as good as Get Out. And then when Nope came out, they're like, not as good as Get Out and Us. And then now, and I'm not sure. That is a perfectly valid opinion, but I feel like part of it is, it's some people seem to just want to take the safe bet and just say, okay, I know what that is, and I know what I feel about that kind of thing, so I can just 2 + 2 = good, or whatever. But
yeah.
It makes that harder.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Davide.
Davide?
Davide. Or Dave.
Davide.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. I'll get it on the 5th try.
Okay, this is my question for you.
Sure.
How was your passion for cinema start?
Oh my God. I don't know exactly, although not to brag, but I'm because I never take time off from work, or I haven't in a long time, and I've never been to this place out those windows, which is Paris, but probably French films, I think. And I realized when I took French classes later that I was like, why do I understand what everybody's saying already? And it was because, not everything, but I realized that it had been in my head for so long just from watching, even though I was reading the subtitles. I was also, so yeah. But the reason I was, because my parents are omnivorous with the stuff, that the culture, they read a ton and they watch everything, and they have very strong opinions about everything. And they definitely love sort of, they grew up they were sort of coming of age in the late 60s when film took some big turns with, various new waves and revolutions happening. So I think that got them really excited. So they're kind of they've hung on to the sort of early pre-new wave and neo-realist and that stuff, like really. So I was probably like 4 and like they were watching Satyricon or something, and I was like, what? So a lot of things, like I was saying about realizing about French and French films, I would also watch a movie in my 20s or late teens and be like, I've seen this before. Oh, I think I remember watching some scene of this as my parents were watching it. They also had no filter. So we'd just be in the video store and I'd be like, I was a teenager, so I'd be like, I want the one with the sex in it. And they'd be like, okay. You figure, see what you think. Not totally irresponsible, but very liberal with that. So, and I think, I grew up in Los Angeles where, there are a lot of challenges with the education system there. It's a very big city and the city doesn't really fund very good. They keep underfunding the public education. So my parents sort of encouraged me to be a bit of an autodidact and took me to the libraries and bookstores and movie stores to rent and buy stuff and books and all that. So I could kind of find my own interests. And so, yeah, video stores. I'm glad I grew up in the age of the dawn of the DVD to the death of the DVD, which isn't quite there yet, but because in the middle of that was the burning phase when you could just get anything if you knew where to go.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy that it's actually harder now, even though we have the internet connecting everything, it's harder to find some things now. So I went to college in Chicago and there's a great video store there, or a couple, but there was one in particular where you could go and for $5 they'd burn you a copy of anything in the store. So I did that a lot. So I'm glad some people pay for these things because I make a living from it now. But so it's hard for me to trace, but I think it definitely comes from my family. My dad was a cinematographer for a little while in the 70s. And then he switched to doing very technical film work with, they call it computer and television playback, where like when they show a computer or TV screen, they have to figure out how to sync the camera shutter to the panning. He sort of figured that out first in the early 80s.
Wow.
So for like 15 years, he was the guy they called to do that, and he built a little circuit and he'd plug it in and they'd do it. And so I was growing up when I was like 13. I was like crawling under the control room for Jurassic Park, plugging in the monitors or like the Apollo 13 mission control and weird stuff like that. But it was all very crew technical. So it was like, don't talk to the producer, don't look at them, just do your job. So I saw a very unglamorous side of movies. Meanwhile, I was watching a lot of stuff, but I think because of that, maybe I steered away from Hollywood a little bit and watched a lot of international cinema. And then to end a very long answer to your question, I think the thing about, I would have been interested in film and watching films and talking about them, but the thing that sort of, I think, shifted me from kind of wanting nothing to do with it because I saw how hard it was from a crew level was in college. I think getting exposed to a number of filmmakers who are working, a lot of the filmmakers I fell in love with in college they self-consciously reference a totally different tradition from like Ozu through Bresson to Chantal Ackerman and this kind of very simple, slow cinema, demystifying, often Marxist, often feminist, often, sometimes anarchist. And what that did for me in college was, again, another golden age I lived through was 24p video came out. And for a few years, you could shoot on a $1,000 camera a film that could go to any festival in the world and maybe even get distributed. So it was this crazy moment, which doesn't happen very often, when the technology got slightly ahead of everyone else. And before they figured out how to make more money off of it and shut that off. So, so I was in school and I was watching these movies. Like Pedro Costa is probably my favorite director ever, shooting on the same camera that I could get out of my film cage at school. And I think that and Simon Liang, I think, was the other one where I heard him speak about how, he's won every award, but he'll never win the screenwriting award because his scripts are just 10 pages long and just an outline. And I was like, oh, okay, so I have the camera, I have an outline. Like, there's literally nothing stopping me from trying this. So I think that's what really got me interested in trying to make stuff. And then my background with my dad of having used the software from a young age, everybody just asked me to edit their stuff, their projects, and I knew how, and I liked it. Other people hated it. They'd watch the same clip 3 times and be like, my brain's gonna explode. And I was like, well, I don't know what you mean. It's fine. I want to keep watching it over and over. So it wasn't a plan at all, but a lot of things I got exposed to earlier, I think, ended up coming back around.
I'm Massimiliano. Max, it's perhaps easier. And I wanted to ask you something. It's not a question that I prepared, but something that I came up while hearing you talking about your passion for social movies. Let's say social themed movies. French movies have a particular accent to that. So, do you think that that aspect of your of your personal studies in cinema helped you while joining Peele's movies? Because he's a really, even though that's on the surface an horror slash alien invasion, it's not that, but that movie, it has a huge social commentary with the figures of many minorities that Hollywood uses and then mistreats. So do you think that that helped in some way?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think so. It feels extremely lucky to me because given my interest in the things that I spent a lot of time doing on my own and studying and working on in school and like independent projects and art projects. When I moved back to Los Angeles when I was about 30 and was looking for work, it was a little cognitive dissonance with most of the things that you can get paid for in a big center of media production like Los Angeles or other cities like, around the world. So a lot of it is very commercial and a lot of it is not full of social conversations about society and the way it functions and how we represent that in film.
Yeah.
So I think I've been very lucky. I mean, I've tried to be selective while also trying to play the game which is very competitive and where you have to just learn it and do it a lot in order to be good enough to do the things that you really want to do also. So, but there's definitely an element of luck involved where I've been around and heard about the right things at the right time. And so, good news is I also really like comedy, and that was sort of how I grew up with my friends. Like they're all comedians and we're all, talking about comedy most of the time. So that weird combination of things sort of led me to working on some comedy stuff like Key and Peele. So, which also, rather than blending kind of, I mean, obviously it's another blend, right, of like social commentary, but with comedy, or looking at it through looking at it that way. And which I really appreciated, and also with a very critical sort of deconstruction of different genres and filmmaking techniques, and finding what's funny or ridiculous about certain genres or tropes or filmmakers. So that was great too, because I think I had always looked at kind of Hollywood stuff, even though I grew up in it, a bit from the outside, kind of deconstructing it myself and thinking about that way. Whereas the stuff I was actually doing and really passionate about was often trying to be as different from that as possible. But then when I started doing it for work, I was like, okay, I think I came at it sort of the opposite way a lot of people do, or it felt that way, where I think a lot of the people around me I met, directors and other editors, were totally obsessed with the pop culture, mass media stuff, knew all the latest commercial things, and also, the stuff deepest in their heart were the big blockbuster movies of the 80s and 90s. Whereas for me, I always kind of laughed at those a little bit, but then had to really look at them again and take them apart and think like, okay, how do they do that? How do they create that sense of spectacle, or that sense of sort of a broader humor, or whatever, or jump scares and all these things, which were not my natural inclination, but I sort of looked at them very analytically and studied them that way, which sort of works for editing, because I think you can love them all you want, but if you don't know how they actually work and you aren't looking at them kind of a little bit scientifically, I mean, you have to have both. You have to just know and feel it, and then you also have to know how to fix it, which means okay, that's wrong because the rhythm got off there, or that's wrong because if the sound isn't playing the right way, you don't feel connected to the character, and that's why it's not scary or whatever. So yeah, I think I think that one thing I love about Jordan in particular, and Nope, and it's different in Us, but related. But in Nope, I really love that characters, I mean, for a massive movie with giant aliens in it, everybody has a job. Everybody goes to work. And that is a thing that in American movies are just most of the time not concerned with. It's not part of what makes a sort of mythological American character. Usually their job, if they have one, is kind of BS. And it was like, I'm an architect. Are you? Like, you never go to work, or you don't seem interested in architecture at all, or whatever it is. So, or you just live in a big house and never explain why, how. So there's sort of the class and the work element. The materiality of people's lives is often left. I think there's been a formula in Hollywood, again, it's concerned with different things. So it's not really, I don't think you can really fault it for this, but there's just a lack of, I think the goal has often been to create these kind of extremely generic characters. And usually what happens when you try to make a generic thing is you bring all the baggage of your society with you. So generic usually means white, and generic usually means male. And so those are, and also you're supposed to want to be these people usually in an American movie, and that means rich or at least comfortable and not struggling. So anyway, that's fine. But if you look at back a little ways or through the cracks of some of that stuff, you see a lot of filmmakers and films, even in popular films, but I think in America it was probably more in the 70s and a little bit in the 80s that you saw in bigger films, you saw really specific, unique, fleshed out characters, as well as their life and the way they interact with society, what they do for a living, or what makes them their you know, you think of like Jaws, for instance, what a specific weird subculture that is, that weird island and town, like, and this weird cop who like doesn't really want to be a cop, and his family problems, or like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters. Those are like, they don't really write characters like that very much anymore. And I think, I don't want to speak for Jordan, but I've gotten the sense from things he's said that, you know, when you're growing up in the 80s and 90s watching those movies, and you love those movies and you love everything about them, except no one's relationship to society is like yours as a kid. He's now making that, and he sort of taught Hollywood that you can make those movies with more specific, fleshed out characters and their lives, and people will want to see that and come see it. And he sort of, you know, showed them there is a whole audience for that, who doesn't think like, what, I don't understand, like I can't relate to this character because they're Black, or because they're you know, not, or because they're struggling in some way, or because they're live on a horse ranch, or, you know, these are things that we get over all the time with a lot of other, obviously, yeah, I think the range, everybody knows that the range of, for white characters traditionally is a lot broader. You can be all sorts of things and people don't bat an eye, but then it's like, is it believable that the Black character, you know, and there's much more narrowly defined things that filmmakers and actors and are constantly breaking open and trying to break open, and some studios and people who, you know, finance things too, I'm sure. But yeah, so I think it has come in useful, but mostly because, again, lucky that Jordan likes having me around, where he's thinking about Wes Craven and I'm thinking about Bresson, and we're like somewhere in between, and then something weird comes out of that. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes he's like, I'm thinking about, you know, Kubrick, and I'm thinking, you know, and I'm totally on like, and I'm like, oh, I thought it was like Alien, you know, like it'd be very, very different. So I think he likes having a wide set of influences around him and the people he works with also. Like his main producer was a sculpture professor and a fine artist for many years, and is now producing his films. So he brings a whole other set of like visual art ideas and references to things. And so again, very lucky, because, you know, there's a lot of people who definitely just have an unabashed, uncritical love for everything Hollywood's ever done. And often that's who directors and producers might want around, because, you know, it's to not feel bad about
Yeah.
or something. But hopefully, you know, I love working with people who want to have creative and critical conversations about what we're doing. And Jordan seems to be doing that, where he's, you know, making a giant Hollywood summer movie that goes all over the world that is also very critical of giant movies that, you know, so it's and the whole process of making them. So worked out.
Beautifully. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so talking about editing and always about Nope. And there is a thing that I noticed about the editing structure. So jump in a certain part. So at the beginning, we saw Daniel Kaluuya and his father. We jump when he's already in the obituary with, or in the middle of the movie with the rain in the night. He's driving, we stop, and he's already wake up. And this I think that this is made 5-6 times maybe. This kind of so tell me about this particular jump, and if this in the middle, if you delete something of is a real choice, your choice as an editor.
I wish I could totally take credit for it, but I think what I did, my part in it, was seeing that he wrote some of those in. I mean, he definitely, again, part of his the same thing where he gives the audience so much credit for everything they already know. He seems to write sort of the plot of what's, you know, oh, his dad died. Now he's working on a commercial. He hasn't talked to his sister in a long time, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That sort of just comes out of what you're seeing on screen, the dialogue and the settings, and you put it together. Occasionally, somebody has to say something a little bit more direct, but because he's not out to confuse you, but he knows that you're perfectly capable of figuring some of the stuff out. So, and part of the fun is in figuring it out.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I saw that. So he was doing that already in the writing and the shooting, where that in a lot of those spots, like the father dies, falls off the horse, or doesn't die, was bleeding. Then they shot 2 shots in the car, one on Daniel, one on his dad. Then they shot 1 shot in the hospital waiting room, which we didn't end up using.
Yeah.
Then they shot 1 shot of him standing there or sitting by his dad on the now dead. Then 1 shot of the X-ray, 1 shot looking down on Keith David, and then a few angles, but 1 moment of Daniel back at the ranch looking at the horse standing in the driveway. So you can already tell there's kind of a punctuation and ellipsis in the way they shot it. Now, I interpreted that in my first edits. I could have tried to do something a bit more montage-like with music or with crossfades or something, but I could tell, and we had talked about this idea of you're only getting to see in this movie exactly the first frame of a shot and the last frame of the shot should be very intentional of what you need to know, and sometimes that includes silence and space, but sometimes it's as soon as an action is done, that's it. You're not getting anything. You're not getting any more thematic or plot information in the rest of that scene, so you're out, and you don't need the scene in between there and there. Now, I had some things we always talk about as he's shooting, like, do you wish you got to see what happened between there and there? They would go back. He was very smart and an incredibly talented crew, and who worked really hard on the scheduling, not only getting around various COVID things and weather because of how much of it was outdoors, but also he would watch and edit. I would send him, then he would go back and say, you know what, I want to go back into the house and get this one thing. I want to go back into the stables and get another thing. And they would work it into the schedule as they were still shooting. And then they did a little bit of pickups at the end. So we kept experimenting with this. And the big process on the Nope edit was, it was very stable to begin with, but we explored just about every possible option for about a year. Like, we put this scene before that scene, we put this shot before the other shot, we made that shot, we did that as a oneer, then we changed it not as a oneer, we did it with music, we did it without music, we looked at it every different way, often just kind of testing the emotional response, and usually ending up somewhere close to where we started or totally somewhere new, and because it sparked something interesting. So that staccato kind of style of the thing, and especially those time jumps, I'd say, I don't know what the percentage is, but maybe half were totally shot and written that way. And then once I understood that style he was going for, I would use it other places. Yeah. And then, you know, sometimes we would be like, no, actually there, I don't, I think I want to do a softer transition, or I want to, want to do something a little more traditional or whatever. But one thing that one movie we did talk about was No Country for Old Men, and the way that film is almost totally musicless, but also every shot sort of has that feel. Most of the cuts have that feeling in it of very precise moments. And again, I'm not going to say Nope is anything like a Bresson movie, because it's not shot or written or anything like it. But that is a thing that I feel in that lineage also of that, you know, kind of a sense of the clockwork of the thing being very, very intentional, which I love, because it just makes you know that as soon as you sense that's what's going on with a filmmaker, it makes you, when you do get a little bit of space and time on a shot, you lean in and you're like, wait, what's going on here? And you're thinking about it a little bit more actively. So he was kind of ruthless. There's a lot more material, but especially in the first half an hour, he shot and wrote a lot more, and then we just kept getting shorter and shorter, because he wanted to make sure the audience knew that if we were showing you something, there was a reason, or it would pay off later.
Yeah.
And we mostly, so the stuff we debated was the themes that way. It was like, I wanted to maybe include this shot because it told me more about a theme, and you'd be like, you know what, that theme's not as important actually. But okay, so that was the debate most of the time.
Yeah, and because it's for me it's new. You watch the movie and you see there are time jumps, ellipse, and one time you say, okay, right, there is why I have to see A, B, C, why I have to see the B, because it's not important. So it's really interesting, because when you do a lot, it's like a stylistic thing to the movie. And it's really interesting, because even if it's right in the script before the editing, is really interesting that way.
It's interesting to me. I think us as a film, I think the editing rhythm is maybe more me than Nope is. Nope. What I felt like on Nope, my role was really as like I've said this before, but it really feels like being a sort of laboratory assistant, where he says, you know, I want to find out like how you create this emotion or this sensation. I'm thinking it probably has to do with like these kinds of elements. What do you got? And then he'll leave or whatever, sit there, and I'll put together 10 different ways maybe you could do that. He'll watch them all, and then he'll say, I guess like 3 and 7 are kind of what I'm talking about. What if we combine those and then use like the end of one? And so we get somewhere new that neither of us had thought of. but the end result is often, and especially on Nope, the end result is probably not how I would have just done it myself. It was, and so there, when I'm watching it, I'm still interested by it because where we ended up and where he really was like, okay, that really is doing what I'm looking for. Be like, oh, like that's what you're looking for. That's a thing that I didn't already have a formula for in my head. So it's a new thing to me, and it confuses me and also is exciting. Whereas I think Us feels like I knew what it was and I did it, and it feels, I think because it's a genre that's a bit more defined, I was like, I'm gonna do that exactly. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. You also working on Cobra Kai, right?
That's right. Yep.
When did you approach this sequel? Because it's a cult of the 18th, so it's the most important movie.
Totally. That's funny. Yeah, I think probably I mean, this changes all the time, but Nope, now Nope and Cobra Kai are probably the two things that people seem like most interested in. So this is stuff I get asked about or emails about it, which is amazing. I didn't know when I was doing that show. When I first heard the idea, I thought that's the worst idea I've ever heard. Why are they doing this? But then I looked up the guys who were making it. I was like, okay, they're actually pretty funny and know what they're doing. And then I heard it was going to be the original cast, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. And then I read the script, and I actually read the script wrong. When I read the script, I read it as being really dark and like in like a Coen Brothers kind of way. Like I thought it was like, I thought Daniel was going to be a total schmuck, and they ended up making it a little bit more normal. But I was sort of excited by this idea of making it like a really dark satire about how all your hopes and dreams as a teenager of being, of tapping into an ancient tradition and finding spiritual peace and achieving glory through your art and martial arts, all would just fall apart and you just end up being a car dealer. But they ended up making it a lot more sort of fleshed out and human than that. It isn't really just a satire. It's really, the characters sort of took on a whole life. So I was so excited, and that also, because I watched that movie a million times growing up, and it's so cool for an 80s movie because all the ones that I think have that status, like Karate Kid, you go back and watch them and you're like, these are insane. How did they get this made? Like, what are they doing with puppets and like weird laser effects? And like, but then you go and you watch Karate Kid and it's very restrained. It's a very simple movie. And again, it's the thing you're talking about, like kind of poor. They live in like a kind of a shitty apartment in the valley of Los Angeles, and they're kind of real, and it's sort of gritty and dirty, that movie, and so it holds up really well. And when I rewatched it before that, I was like, okay, this is exciting because I knew a little bit more about where the first series was going, and there's a particular thing I remember having fun with, which was in, I think it was episode 7, I'm not sure, but Johnny tells Miguel what happened when Daniel came in high school, but from his point of view. And the challenge there was to use the footage from the original movie, but edit it to make Johnny look like the good guy and Daniel look like the bad guy. And that was really fun to do, because if you think about the movie, Daniel is kind of the bad guy in a way. Other than the few obviously really dickish things that Johnny does. But you sympathize with both of them, and you sympathize with Johnny being in that weird culty Cobra Kai thing. So it was just, you know, it was really fun, but the challenge on that was it was the first season and they hadn't done a pilot. They hadn't done a pilot. So they started shooting the whole season and finding the tone. I mean, they had to figure it out as they were shooting. And, you know, it was like, what are we using? Score? Are we using famous songs? Are we doing montages? Are we winking a lot with the tone being, or are we, so there were a lot of experiments where it was very useful. You know, my background was very DIY, like I would do all the music and the sound design and the titles and the graphics myself, like at art school and stuff. Most of the time now, I don't do that anymore. And there's somebody who's way better at it right down the hall who can do it and should do it because they're paying them. But that was an instance where it was useful to do that because the guys would be like, I don't know, like, this isn't quite right. And I would do the fight sound effects differently. I would do the music differently. I would throw some graphics on it. And that helped us find the tone, I think, in the first few episodes. But it was long enough after the original. And because it was a TV show and that was a film, and because the original actors were involved, it didn't feel like stomping on a sacred thing. It felt like this is very clearly a kind of parallel universe to the original. This is a new take on it that doesn't really, it can't damage the original in any way, really, you know. It's its own thing. And I think they did an impressive job at that. But yeah, I'm trying to I don't know. I enjoyed it. I mean, the coolest thing was I got the original edit book from the original editor of Karate Kid, and I got to flip through it and look at the coverage that they had. So like one thing we were doing was that the show started with the famous crane kick at the tournament. So I looked at that scene and saw there were a number of camera angles that they didn't use in the film in the dailies. So we requested that they pull the negative from the storage, print them, and get it to us. And they had a close-up slow motion angle of the crane kick that they didn't use that we got to use in the show. So that was kind of, I mean, amazing to get, you know, 30-year-old dailies for the first time and use it for the first time. Kind of fun.
So yeah, I wanted to ask you something about the structure. Francesco was talking about the ellipses in the movie. One thing that struck me was the chapter, almost like chapter sections in the film, all based on the animals, and with the final surprise that the last is from Jean Jacket. So to confirm and solidify the fact that it's not a UFO, a spaceship or something, but it's an animal. How did that come out to be? Did you plan it at the start of the shooting? Was it something that came up later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting one because yeah, in my mind, I read it in the script. He had written in chapter markers, but they were different than what they ended up being. But that it's interesting because when you read it that way, I think the chapter thing feels very formal and like kind of takes you out of the movie and puts it a little bit more on like a stage, sort of like, you know, Barry Lyndon or something. But I think that once I saw the footage and also just in our conversations about how immersive he wanted the movie to be with the IMAX and Atmos sound and everything, it's an interesting kind of difference there from how that might normally feel. And so we were instantly sort of talking about, you know, again, Jordan, very open to ideas, and he kind of intentionally doesn't give me answers for a while. So I'll say, if there is anything specific you're thinking about the way you want them to look or come on screen, let me know. Otherwise, I'll do the thing I do, which is just guess and show you options. And he likes that. He likes keeping me like nervous and I'm not quite sure what's right. And so I show him a lot of stuff because is this right? Please. So it's not evil, but he knows what he's doing. So I tried a lot of things, and then knowing that he probably was going to not make that decision finally until he really had to. That's kind of the whole thing on Nope, was like, as long as he had to experiment, he would, and then when he had to decide, he would. So we talked about how, we talked about how while you're shooting on film, this whole movie is about the media. I mean, the medium is the message in a lot of ways on this movie. And so why don't you do the titles the way they would have on a 80s or on a film. And so film the titles or optically print them, one of the two. So they opted to film them, and Hoyt put the IMAX camera on a big crane. They printed out giant titles and they filmed them. But we filmed a bunch more than were the ones in the movie. And one thing that happened was that section, the two that changed were, there was a section, the one that says Clover now, used to say Clover and Prince. And Prince was the name of the decoy horse. But the scene where M or Kiki mentions that's the name, that line got trimmed out. So the title then didn't make any sense to put up there, because you would have been like, Prince, what are you talking about? So that one changed to just Clover. And then later, the biggest change in the movie, and the one that we debated the most, is one that I will have to be very careful how I talk about, because it might still come out in some other form in the future, is the Gordy section. God, I have to be so careful what to say, because people go crazy over this stuff. There was a lot more written and filmed and edited in that section,
and we might see it someday.
I think if not the thing we already made, he might just take that idea and use it in a different thing, because it sort of had its own sort of currently in the final version of the movie, which is definitely Jordan's preferred version. It's not like there's a one that he really wanted to do and couldn't. That is the one he wanted in the context of that whole movie. But there was sort of a whole other way into it with like a different framing device. So it already kind of cuts in the middle of the movie into a totally different time. It stands alone in the movie, as it's like you leave the current time frame, go there, and then come back. And so there was another way into it, which had a lot more material and a lot more stuff. So that chapter was also different because of that. And he used to say 1998, which is the year. And at some point it just was like, well, wait a second. All the other ones are about the animals. Yeah. That one's got to be Gordy, right? And so I put it as Gordy. He was like, totally. And then that stayed that way. So that's the only one that wasn't actually filmed also. Cool trivia. But the VFX people did a very good job of making it.
Absolutely.
And we used the real grain and all the real stuff to make it as close to the filmed version as possible. But Yeah, so that one changed, and then it became all about the animals, and then the jean jacket was is an interesting one also because Lucky is the only one who survives of all of those, spoiler alert, of all of the animals listed, which also feels right just for being, because he's lucky. And,
Lucky. Yeah.
But yeah, you know, so to me, it became less about the sort of formality of like chapters, like this is there's an author interjecting themselves and saying, and now I will take you to the next part. It has a little bit of that feeling, but it also is more telling you to pay attention to the connections between Gordy and Jean Jacket or the horses, and you know, it just gives you one more reason to think about those themes, I think. And hopefully also it does something fun where once you know, when you see a title and then you see the next one, you go, oh, okay, wait, the last time I saw a title, that horse disappeared, so I guess I'm about to see something else bad happen, which was also fun to play with. The exact place we put him shifted a little bit also, just to make sure we got that as much of the punch out of it as we could, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this insight. It was awesome, and we hope to see more of your work with Mr. Peele, and perhaps even something, whichever scene you were talking about in whatever form it might come out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this.
In between our Zoom sessions, I was emailing about that. I was like, wait, anyway, so yeah, that's funny. It's something's happening. I don't know what, but Jordan said in an interview not long ago, he's like, we're not done telling Nope stories yet, or something.
Yeah, I read it, that interview. I read it.
That's, by the way, that's how I find things out also. I didn't know the name of the movie until he tweeted it out. So there you go. Yeah. Always full of surprises. Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It was amazing, and we hope to see more of your work. And again, thank you.
Continued success with the
thank you so much.
Podcast and the videos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you to you. Bye.
Good
night.
Bye. Good night.
night.